The Sodder children didn't die in a fire. They vanished. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, Betty, 5 children, ages 14, 12, 10, 8, and 5. Gone. Not a single bone was ever found. Not a single trace. And the official explanation, it defies everything we know about fire, physics, and common sense. This is the story that has haunted America for nearly 80 years. A story that begins on a night that should have been filled with joy. Christmas Eve, 1945. America was finally at peace. World War II had ended just 3 months earlier. Soldiers were coming home. Families were reuniting. Hope was in the air. In the small coal mining town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family was preparing for their own celebration. George and Jennie Sodder, Italian immigrants who had built a successful trucking business from nothing, had 10 children. 9 were home for the holidays. Only their second oldest son, Joe, was away, serving in the military overseas. The Sodders were the embodiment of the American dream, hardworking, respected, and deeply rooted in their community. Their 2-story home, located 2 miles north of Fayetteville, was filled with the chaos and joy that only 10 children can bring. That evening, 19-year-old Marion had surprised her younger sisters with new toys from the dime store where she worked. Martha, 12, Jennie, 8, and little 5-year-old Betty were overjoyed. They begged their mother to let them stay up late and play. At 10 p.m., Jennie finally relented. She told the children they could stay up a little later, but reminded the 2 oldest boys still awake, 14-year-old Maurice and his 9-year-old brother, Louis, that they had chores to do before bed. The cows needed to be put in. The chickens needed to be fed. Jennie then took 2-year-old Sylvia upstairs, and they went to bed together. George and the 2 oldest sons, 22-year-old John and 16-year-old George Jr., had worked all day and were already asleep. Marion had drifted off on the living room couch. The house fell quiet. Christmas morning was just hours away. Then, at 12:30 a.m., the phone rang. Jennie woke up, groggy, and trudged downstairs to answer it. A woman's voice was on the other end, the voice Jennie did not recognize. The woman asked for someone whose name Jennie had never heard. In the background, there was laughter, the clinking of glasses, a party of some kind. When Jennie explained she had the wrong number, the woman began to laugh. Not a normal laugh, a weird laugh, a laugh that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Jennie hung up and started back toward the stairs, but something stopped her. The lights were still on. The curtains were still open. The front door was unlocked. All the things she had specifically asked the children to take care of before bed. She assumed they had simply forgotten. So she locked the door, turned off the lights, drew the curtains, and went back to bed. It was a small annoyance, nothing more. She had no way of knowing that she had just witnessed the first thread of a web of mystery. A web that would never be untangled. At 1 a.m., Jennie was awakened again, this time by a loud bang on the roof. Then a rolling sound, like something heavy tumbling down the shingles. She lay in bed, listening. Silence returned. Too tired to investigate, she convinced herself it was nothing and drifted back to sleep. It was the last peaceful sleep she would ever have. 30 minutes later, at 1:30 a.m., Jennie woke up choking. The room was filled with smoke. She ran into the hallway and saw flames erupting from George's office, the very room where she had answered that strange phone call just an hour earlier. "George, get up. The house is on fire." What happened in the next few minutes would be debated for decades. What is known as this: George, Jennie, and 4 of their children, Marion, Sylvia, John, and George Jr., escaped the burning house. But 5 children did not. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, Betty. They were somewhere in that inferno. And what happened next defied all logic, all probability, and all explanation. George tried to find a ladder to reach the second-floor windows. The ladder he kept propped against the house every single night. It was gone, vanished. He ran to his 2 coal trucks, parked nearby. He hoped to drive one close to the house, to climb onto the roof. He jumped into the first truck, turned the key, nothing. He ran to the second truck, turned the key, nothing. Both engines, which had worked perfectly the day before, refused to start. The telephone line was dead. When investigators checked later, they discovered it hadn't been burned through. It had been cut, cleanly, deliberately. There was a barrel of water near the house that could have been used to fight the flames. It was frozen solid. For 45 minutes, the Sodder family watched their home burn. They screamed the children's names. They heard nothing in return. No cries for help. No answering calls. Nothing but the roar of the flames. The fire department was only 2.5 miles away, but they wouldn't arrive until 8 o'clock that morning, more than 6 hours late. By then, the Sodder home had burned to the ground, and the 5 children had vanished without a trace. The official conclusion was simple. The children had died in the fire. The blaze was so hot, investigators said, that their bodies were completely cremated. Nothing remained. The case was closed. But here's where the story takes a turn that defies belief. Jennie Sodder refused to accept this explanation. She began conducting her own experiments. She took chicken bones and later, bones from pork chops and beef and burned them in her kitchen stove. Then she burned them in open fires in her yard. The bones never disappeared. They charred, they blackened, but they remained recognizable. She contacted a local crematorium and asked how hot a fire had to be to completely destroy human bones. The answer she received would change everything. The crematorium told her that even after 2 hours at 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, human bones do not vanish. They remain intact enough to be identified. The Sodder house fire had burned for approximately 45 minutes, and while it was hot, it had not melted the metal appliances in the home. Those were found, twisted but recognizable, in the ashes. So where were the bones? Where were the bodies of 5 children? If the fire was hot enough to completely cremate 5 human beings, why were there metal objects that had survived? The official explanation was collapsing under its own weight. And then there were the threats. Just 2 months before the fire, an insurance salesman had come to the Sodder home, trying to sell George a policy on his children. George refused. The man became angry. As he left, he turned and delivered a chilling warning. "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke," he said, "and your children are going to be destroyed. You'll have to answer for all the dirty remarks you've made about Mussolini." George Sodder was a vocal opponent of the Italian fascist dictator. In the close-knit Italian immigrant community of Fayetteville, those opinions had made enemies. And here's the detail that should have reopened the case immediately. That same insurance salesman sat on the coroner's jury that declared the fire an accident and the children dead. The man who threatened the family helped decide their fate. The case was closed. But for the Sodder family, the nightmare was just beginning. Because the more they looked, the more they realized that nothing about that night made any sense. A missing ladder, 2 dead trucks, a cut phone line, a strange phone call, a mysterious bang on the roof, fireballs seen by a bus driver, a suspicious object found in the ashes, and a threatening man sitting on the jury. Too many coincidences, too many questions, too few answers. This is the story of America's most haunting Christmas mystery, a story of 5 children who vanished into thin air. A story of a family who refused to give up hope. A story that remains unsolved to this day. What really happened to the Sodder children? Did they die in that fire? Or did they wake up somewhere else, under different names, in different lives, never able to find their way home? I'm your host, and this is Dark Evidence.